All right, people, we are back in from the break of the #1 forum for Bama football news. In my own words, yours truly, Stephen M. Smith. Touchdown, Alabama Magazine. Crimson Tide, Mississippi State, set for 6 p.m. Central Time kickoff. ESPN will have the call on the matchup from Davis-Wade Stadium in Starkville, Mississippi. Cowbells on display. But right now, we're going to get into just this matchup and the importance of this game for Alabama, both offensively and defensively, because it does present a challenge here to the Crimson Tide. You know, two of the teams that have always played Alabama tough, hard-nosed, physical. You got to talk about the South Carolina Gamecocks in the early years of Coach Saban, Gamecocks coached by Steve Spurrier, and, of course, Mississippi State. And huge matchup here for the Tide. Battle for Highway 82, the Bulldogs coming in 3-2, on the year. Much improved offensively. Defensively, they kind of play that 3-3 stack type of defense, so they love to bring pressure from all forms, all areas of the field. Got a really good cornerback in Emmanuel Forbes, who has 7 interceptions combined in the last 2 years. But the big thing in all of this is Mike Leach. Head coach Mike Leach in his second year in Starkville. The air raid offense is starting to really take effect right now. I know last season, Leach, in the first game against LSU with KJ Costello, it really looked good in the first matchup, but the Bulldogs kind of spiraled down the stretch of the season for the remainder of that year. But in year 2, you are starting to see the air raid offense take root here for Leach. And it starts with the quarterback, Will Rogers, the sophomore out of Brandon, Mississippi. I mean, the guy has greatly improved in terms of completion percentage. He leads the SEC with 75.7% of passes completed, has 1,862 passing yards to lead the SEC. His 14 touchdown passes are third in the conference, but more so bigger than Rogers is, the Bulldogs have developed weapons at wide receiver. When you talk Makai Polk at 6'3", Jaden Whaley at 6 feet, you've got Austin Williams at 6'3", you got Malik Heath at 6'3". So these are big physical targets, big-bodied receivers that like to get yards after the catch. They can make contested catches. They're really pure route runners, just big-time playmakers there. On the outside, Makai Polk has 4 touchdown receptions on the season. Jaden Wiley has 4 touchdown receptions. Malik Heath has 2 touchdown catches. So the Bulldogs have done a really outstanding job of developing, of crafting, of just producing strong play at the wide receiver position this season thus far. And then, of course, they can run the football. The Bulldogs have improved in that area. Now, of course, it's not really Mike Leach's cup of tea if you've studied where he has been, going back to his days as an offensive coordinator and a quarterback's coach at Kentucky under head coach Hal Mumme. That was where the air raid offense was born right there. And then what Leach did at Texas Tech as a head coach with quarterbacks like Graham Harrell, wide receivers like Michael Crabtree, and then that success continued at Washington State in the Pac-12. We have seen what Mike Leach has done, throwing the ball all over the field. He loves to stress the opposing team's secondary and linebackers out, and he will look to do these things against Alabama. But for the Crimson Tide this week defensively, starting off with the defensive line, it may not get the amount of sacks that it wants to in this game. Last year, Alabama had 2 sacks of Costello and Will Rogers. The Tide pitched a 41-0 shutout of the Bulldogs at Bryant-Denny Stadium, the lone shutout it had for the season. So if Alabama's trying to pitch another shutout to give that defense confidence, now would most certainly be the time. But just for the defensive front, it may not be able to get as many sacks as it would like to, just seeing how Rogers gets rid of that ball between 2 and 2.3 seconds. That ball comes out quick. So the big thing here for guys like Fedarian Mathis, for DJ Dale, for LeBron Ray, for T.M. Smith, for Jamil Burrows, for Byron Young, for all of these guys rotating here on this defensive front, get your hands up in the air, affect the passing game. Bat balls down. Batted passes work just as well as sacks because it frustrates the quarterback. It shrinks his passing lane. It gets into that quarterback's mind. When you see so many balls batted right back in your face, batted towards the ground, it does something to that quarterback's confidence in terms of the aerial attack, the vertical passing game. So batting passes down will be huge for Alabama. Along with that, collapsing the pocket from the inside is going to be huge for this defensive front, preventing Rodgers from stepping up and actually stepping into throws downfield to those weapons and targets. When you're able to collapse the pocket and prevent the quarterback from stepping into throws, this leads to poor throws. You're not putting the touch on the ball. You're not putting the accuracy on the ball. Maybe you're not putting as much velocity on the football, and this can lead to those turnovers that Coach Saban wants to have more of as we get deeper into the season. So for the defensive front, if it can create those sacks, which it wants to do that's still huge, that's still big for the confidence, but if it's not able to put Rodgers on the ground the way it would like to, getting batted passes, critical, and then also collapsing the pocket from the inside, trying to force some of those poor throws that can create the turnovers, huge there for the Tide defensive front. As we go to now Alabama's secondary, the big thing for this group is going to be tackling in space. This is huge. I go back to what Mississippi State wants to do in this game. Yards after the catch. Being able to put a move on an Alabama DB in space, get up and down the field, turn what should be a 5-yard play to a 15-yard play, 20-yard play, 30-yard play, touchdown. You know what I'm trying to say here. Tackling in space is going to be imperative for guys like Jordan Battle, for guys like DeMarco Helms, for guys like Brian Branch, for players like Josh Jobe, Jalen Armour Davis. You've got to be able to tackle in space. Now, I know for a lot of you fans out there, you would like to see more of Kool-Aid McKinstry. I've heard those complaints. I know a lot of you would like to see more of guys like Marcus Banks and Terrion Arnold out there on the field, young guys getting opportunities. And hopefully we may see a few of those young guys get out there and showcase their skill set on the field. But for the guys that are going to be out there playing, the guys that we know as starters, the big thing for these players will be tackling in space. Wrap up. Bring your arms, bring your body, tackle in space, make sound tackles in space, limit the big plays, limit the chunk yardage, limit the huge production. You're going to give up some plays against State. That's just inevitable. They run the air raid offense. They throw the ball everywhere. You are going to give up some plays against Michael Leach in this group. But the main thing is the moment the ball is caught, break down, tackle. Do not allow these big-time chunk plays, yards after the catch. And then number two for the secondary, trusting the technique. There have been a lot of times this season, whether it's been Josh Jobe or whomever the person may be, not trusting the technique, getting called for pass interference, getting called for holdings, getting called for just different fouls, different penalties, saving, continuing to want to see the penalties cleaned up, especially from the defensive secondary. So trusting your technique on the field, being in that receiver's hip pocket, playing the ball, showing those ball skills, and understanding if I'm right there in the pocket of the wide receiver, I'm right there in position to make a play, and got to be able to make that play. So just going back to the defensive line here, defensive front, the main thing for the guys up front is going to be getting those hands in the passing lane, batting balls down, tipping passes, breaking up on balls, that being able to create that type of friction, that type of frustration for Will Rogers at quarterback, also not being able to allow him to step up in the pocket, collapsing that pocket a little bit so that he can't step up and make those throws. And then defensively for the secondary are the big two things here, tackling in space and then trusting that technique there in the defensive secondary for the Crimson Tide.